I want to bring in Doug Wead. He's a presidential historian and also the author of Inside Trump's White House, a former advisor to President George H.W. Bush as well. There's his book there. Hey, Doug, why is it the fact that when President Obama visited Mount Rushmore, as well as Hillary Clinton, she visited as well, Bernie Sanders, even as recently as 2016, spoke so highly of the monument that was met with praise, and yet we saw President Trump do the same thing, and his speech was considered divisive?
Well, it's very complicated. It doesn't lend itself well to a 30-second soundbite, but I interviewed the president and asked that continually. Why is the media so unfair to you? And the best way to summarize it is that Donald Trump, when he came to power, immediately deregulated the big monopolies that own the television networks and or sponsor all of the programs on the television networks. All the money is coming from big monopolies, and those monopolies depend on China. Sometimes the revenues are 40, 60% from China. And they also depend on heavy regulations, which keep the small business competitors away so they can have a monopoly. And Donald Trump disrupted that. It resulted in a great economy and a booming economy and many new jobs, but it's made some people permanently angry.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the money aspect of it, but I also want to talk about the viewpoints and platforms as well. The president didn't shy away from it during the speech last night. I'll read part of it for you, saying, quote, "We're now in the process of defeating the radical left, the anarchists, the agitators, the looters, and the people who in many instances have absolutely no clue what they're doing. We will never allow an angry mob to tear down our statues, erase our history, indoctrinate our children." A lot of people would have different responses to that, and that's why we're seeing this coverage being so slanted.
Yeah, this is a hill he's willing to fight on. If he goes down, so be it. But this is a principle he's willing to fight on. He believes in America. You can't bring down the statue of Frederick Douglass. You can't bring down a statue of an abolitionist who gave her life to work to end slavery. You can't deface Abraham Lincoln. This is kind of an obvious ground for him to stand on. Here I stand.
Yeah.
I can do no other. And I think that's a smart political move, even if he loses. If America decides to go Marxist or to go some new quasi version of it under Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi, I don't think he'll be ashamed of the performance he gave.
Yeah, he has never backed down, and clearly has, as we've listened in the speech, you know, his pride in being American is very evident, very apparent. And yet, Joe, you know, when we celebrated the 4th of July this year, some people were not as celebratory. Joe DeGeneva, we'll have you weigh in on this here, because it was almost as though when we heard, at least from candidate Joe Biden, that it was not something we should be celebrating so much this year compared to other years.
Well, first of all, let me say what an honor it is to be on with Doug Wead, a great American historian. And second of all, what you are watching through the media and the leftist criticism of the president is what my friend Chris Plant says. If it weren't for double standards, liberals would have no standards at all. And what you are watching is the corruption of political discourse and constitutional discourse and philosophical discourse. The reason the 4th of July has become ugly to the left is the reason that the musical Hamilton has now become disgusting to them, because nothing is permanent. Nothing has any value. Nothing is worth saving except the leftist Marxist ideology that they believe in. Make no mistake about it. We are in a civil war. Muskets have not been raised yet, but the verbiage and the battle is on. And the president's speech at Mount Rushmore was a glorious declaration of independence of thought.
Yeah. Victoria, you have to wonder what could be next, right? We saw the 4th of July targeted. Is there anything else that we haven't seen yet?
Well, I'll tell you what I don't want to see next, and that is when the dean of the University of Massachusetts Nursing School writes her students and says, take care of all your patients because all lives matter, and she is fired. We have a problem.
Tyranny.
I saw that, and you have to wonder, there will be some lawsuits following that, wouldn't you think? Yeah.
I would hope so.
Yeah. Absolutely. Doug Wead, your final thought and sort of how this speech that we saw over the weekend will carry into the November election, what sort of impact it might have?
I will be surprised if there is not some kind of a backlash in favor of Donald Trump. If that doesn't happen, then, well, I'm an old guy, I'm passing on, and it looks like the communists, I hate to use that word, you sound paranoid when you use it, the Marxists, it looks like they're going to have their day. It looks like Harvard and Stanford and these schools that have been educating these kids for the last 3 generations have pulled it off. And that's sad.
Doug, there's a great story about Ronald Reagan that his staff had to tell him, you cannot call it Red China when you meet with the Chinese.
All right, we'll leave it at that, guys. We're out of time. But we thank you, Doug Wead, for joining us today on the program.